Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How are you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Thank you very much, as always, for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. Appreciate you all very, very much. If you haven't followed or subscribed, I humbly ask that you do so. Tell you what, we're just a couple days into April. March 2024 was the second biggest month we've ever had here in over 6 years at Talking Buffalo. So obviously that is because of you. So again, thank you very much. Today, I'm going to do what is going to be the second of 5 weekly Buffalo Bills mock drafts leading up to the actual real thing beginning on Thursday, April 25th. Before I even get into anything, right off the top, I want to let you know this too. I know there's a gazillion mock drafts out there, whether they're in podcast form, you see a million of them on Facebook and Twitter. Not trying to say that this one is original compared to others, but what I will say is this. For me, when I do these episodes, it's not even as much about the mock draft itself as it is spending time beforehand, which we're going to do today, talking about some players and positional value and moving up, moving down the draft board, what that may take, what they may entail, maybe a couple players that I think are worth trading up for, a couple players that I wouldn't be thrilled to get at 28 if I'm the Buffalo Bills, but I'd certainly be happy to move down and take them and maybe pick up an extra draft pick or two along the way. I want to talk a little bit about what I'm thinking if I'm Brandon Beane, what my draft strategy is going into the draft. So we're going to spend some time talking about the thought exercise process of a Bills mock draft, because to me, again, I think at the end of the day, that ends up being what fans get the most out of, the most informative, maybe the most entertaining, as opposed to just talking for 30 seconds, hitting that PFF mock draft simulator, making 7 picks, and calling it a wrap. Because at the end of the day, we all know year after year after year, no matter how much thought you put into it, all it takes are 1 or 2 teams blowing up a mock draft with a surprise pick or a trade. And then all the work that people have done for weeks, if not months, ends up going up in smoke. So if you judge a mock by its accuracy, you're not really going to get much out of it. But again, if you take the time, if it's in written form, if you read some of the analysis, some of the thought process going into it, or again, on the video, audio podcast side, listening to the thought process behind some of that, maybe, hopefully, you'll get more out of that than just saying, oh, great, another Buffalo Bills mock draft. That's what I try to do anyway with these weekly episodes. And this is the only one that I'm doing solo. And this is the second, like I said, of 5. We kicked it off last week. My man, Bruce Nolan from Buffalo Rumblings, absolutely crushed it. And to that point that I was talking about, Bruce, when he does these, it's not even just a mock draft. It's not necessarily predicting. It's not about predicting where players go. It is a thought exercise. And that's really resonated with me because that's what these are, a thought exercise. And with all the mock drafts out there, and I know Bruce has done some, I've seen many of them on Twitter himself. I would recommend, if you haven't listened or watched last week's show last Wednesday, because we're doing these on Wednesday, go back and check that out, because Bruce had some amazing insight and thoughts to his picks. And I'm going to put up a chart in just a few minutes here and actually reveal, if you missed it, how Bruce Nolan drafted for Brandon Beane in week 1. So anyway, that was last week. I'm doing this today. This is going to be the one episode where I'm in charge. I'm calling the shots. I'm making the picks. The other ones I kind of, I throw some questions at. I ask, for some insight, stuff like that. But ultimately, it's the partner that I have on the episode that week that ultimately pulls the trigger. Last week it was Bruce. Next week, week 3, I'm going to have Anthony Prohaska from Cover one of the very, very best football minds out there. Not just Buffalo, football period, man. This dude brings it. He knows what he is talking about. Love listening to him over at Cover One. He's going to be my guest next week for the third Bills mock. Then we're coming back to back, actually, with another Cover One guy. This one, if you've been a long time consumer of Talking Buffalo, you know the name Aaron Quinn. Aaron, of course, from Cover One as well. Used to be on my show all the time. In fact, the last couple of years we've done this. I think this might be the third year in a row I've done a weekly Bills mock draft. Previous years, Aaron used to do them all with me. Simply put, just doesn't have the time now. Kids in school, busy life, a addict to golf. I got things going on as well, too. So we have not hooked up in quite a while. So I'm very much looking forward to that. In fact, he's going on a cruise on the Royal Caribbean the week before. I just went on one early in February. So I'm kind of looking forward to having a conversation with him about that as well. Anyway, and then the final one, which I believe we're dropping the day before the actual NFL draft. I'm going to circle all the way back. Bruce Nolan's going to join me for a second time, do a mock, see how it compares to his first one and just what's changed for him over what will be at that time a month. So more mocks coming up. Like I said, some really good guests. Before getting into this mock specifically, kind of want to just take a handful of minutes at least and go over some related things that related to the mock that we're going to talk about before we even hit that simulator, which I'll pull up on the video side if you're watching on the video side on the screen. Audio side, of course, I will be describing. But anyway, some of those things include I'm going to put up what my draft goals are before the draft, before we do the mock. If I'm Brandon Beane right now, I kind of want to see once we get going here how they end up aligning with how the thing actually plays out. If I'm the Buffalo Bills, if I'm Brandon Beane right now, I can tell you, I got a couple predetermined to an extent. I mean, I'm going to keep an open mind, but to an extent, I got a couple predetermined thoughts in my mind on how I would like the draft to go. I got a list of a few players that I think realistically could be in that maybe Buffalo Bills trade up range. And by that, I mean, the Bills are picking 28, maybe getting as high as 21, maybe as low as 24, 25, somewhere in that range. A realistic, semi-reasonably cost-effective trade up, as opposed to trying to get into the top 10. I'm not giving up next year's number one. There's too many question marks on this team beyond this year for me to really even consider giving up a number one pick next year. I really don't give a shit how good the player is this year. I'm just not going to do that. But if I'm talking about realistic potential trade-up candidates, I got 2 non-wide receivers that I want to hit on that I will absolutely consider if I keep the pick at 28 and the Bills are on the clock. I got 2 wide receivers that I would be incredibly happy to get with the 28th pick if I end up going wide receiver in the first round. These are 2 guys that I feel realistically could be there. I mean, of course, I'd be real happy to get Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., but we both know it's not going to happen, not at pick 28 anyway. So we'll hit on that. I got 5 guys that if the Bills trade back, they'd be picks that I'd be happy with. I might not love these picks at 28, but if you're talking 30, 32, maybe 35, 36, 37, somewhere in that range, I'd love them. I'm going to drop some player comps at a few positions that we spent a lot of time talking about. Wide receiver, edge, even a couple defensive tackles. A lot of people who want to get into the draft, but only to a extent. Like they don't have the time, the energy, the focus, or in some cases, maybe even the willingness to really dig in and watch tape and study a bunch of players. And instead, and I've been doing this for years and years, I'm the same way. So this isn't a criticism towards anybody, but who's that player like? Give me a comp. Who's this prospect like? Who's his equivalent in the NFL? Who could this player, who does it remind you of? Who will he, potentially turn out to be? Anyway, I was reading an excellent draft guide, a draft preview from the Ringer. So I wrote down a list of a handful of players that I think fans might be interested in, some names that we're hearing flown around as it pertains to Bills drafting that I'll throw out there as well. And then also I got some trade scenarios, actually using trade value charts. Okay, now I know those things aren't perfect, but I see a lot of people putting up mocks where the Bills go up from pick 60 to pick 37 of round 2, and they only give up like a 4th rounder and a 7th rounder. It's not how things work. You can't force a trade. You know, it's got to be at least somewhat in the realm of what a modern day draft chart looked like. So I did some number crunching and I came up with some scenarios where Bills realistically might move up or might move down as well. So on that note, I kind of want to get going here, and I'm going to put up right now on the video side. I'll describe it on the audio side. I said Bruce Nolan was on last week. He did our first mock to kick things off. I do want to say, too, with Bruce last week, it's important to actually throw this out there. I handcuffed Bruce completely. There are no trades allowed whatsoever. So Bruce made 11 selections, which I don't think the Bills are going to make 11 picks. Bruce does not think that the Bills are going to make 11 picks in this draft, but I took away his ability to get rid of some of them, whether it's trading for picks next year, whether it's moving up, stuff like that. I kind of handcuffed him, like I said. Going back to Bruce's draft here, he took a center with the 28th pick, Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon. I'm just going to say quickly, holy shit. I don't want to say the backlash, but we'll say, holy shit, the feedback from that pick. There was a lot of feedback and a mixed bag. Some people like the concept. And again, if you did not catch last week's episode, go back, listen to Bruce, give insight why Jackson Powers Johnson would be a good pick for the Buffalo Bills. I'm not going to sit here and spend a half hour rehashing what Bruce said. But to his pick, some people loved it, loved the concept. Some people hated it. Some people accused Bruce of simply trying to be too cute with the Bills pick. But anyway, he went center first round. He came back with a wide receiver, Javon Baker from UCF in round 2. The Bills do not have a 3rd round pick. They got 2 in the 4th. He went defensive interior lineman, Christian Boyd from Northern Iowa, bounced back with wide receivers. So 2 among the first 4 picks, wide receivers. He went Taj Washington from USC. Not day 3. Round 5, the Bills have 3 picks. Bo Braid, a safety from Maryland, was his first choice. Kalen King, a corner from Penn State, a second. And then Jalen Harrell, an edge rusher from Michigan, was his 3rd. A couple picks. In fact, a trio picks in the 6th round as well. Still don't know the pronunciation of this name. Embarrassing, but Kamani Vidal. I think that might be the guy's name. Bruce talked him up silly last week. One of the best pass blocking running backs you'll ever see. Anyway, he took him out of Troy. Steel Chambers, who he thinks could be another like Tyler Matekevich type. He goes from Ohio State. Caden Wallace, an offensive tackle project from Penn State. And then with the last pick in the 7th round, Bruce admittedly trolled and took Tua Tagovailoa's brother from Maryland, a 7th round pick. Again, in Bruce's mind, that was just a troll. So anyway, that was Bruce Nolan's first round mock. Before we get into this week's mock, again, I want to spend a couple of minutes going over a couple talking points here. If you're watching on video, I got like a little bit of PowerPoint graphics up. Audio side, of course, I'm explaining my draft goals for the Buffalo Bills. Again, me personally as GM of the Bills, but I'm Brandon Bean. I'm getting trench help really early. If it's not my first round pick, I'd say 2 of my first 3 round picks. I think that's the mindset I have right now going in this draft. 2 out of the first 3, certainly no worse than 2 out of the first 4 are going to be guys in the trenches. Wide receiver, I know it's a really deep class, and There's some people out there that say you can get into the end of day 2, hell, maybe even early into day 3, and still get a pretty damn good wide receiver. It might be true. But I'm going to tell you right now, I am not waiting any longer than the second pick if I'm Brandon Beane to take a wide receiver. The Bills need a wide receiver pretty damn early. Another goal of mine, potentially, if it could work out, I'd like to get a third rounder. Maybe that's trading back from 28. Maybe that's trading back from 60. Maybe that's packaging a fourth and something else and trying to get into the third round. But I'm going to be trying to get in the third round. A safety target, I'm got somewhere around round 4. I've done not a lot of mocks, but I paid attention to a lot of them. I've studied some big boards. I've put a lot of stock into what a handful of people out there who I really respect when it comes to safety specifically. And I kind of feel like you could get into early day 3, and there's 3 to 4 safeties out there that I think would be good fits for the Bills. And I feel like 1 or 2 of them should be available with the Bills, maybe first pick of round 4. So that's going to be my target area for the safeties. And then after that, I'd like to get another running back, a big running back, potential complement for James Cook and Ty Johnson as well. And then I'm going to focus maybe more than I would have over the last few years on some special teams help. Because with the new kickoff rule, it appears that special teams may actually matter again a little bit. So, you lose guys like Saron Neal. I don't think Tyler Matekovich is coming back. Not even sure if he's even out there right now as a free agent or not. But I'm going to get me a couple cheap special team minded guys who were good on special teams in college. And I'm going to be focusing on that. Now, when it comes to the 28th pick, I'm going to say this as well, too, before we keep going with this. To me, it's not even so much about 2024, although it is, okay? So I don't want to say like who the Bills take in the first round don't really matter this year. It matters more about the future. It's not true. It matters plenty this year. But you also do have to have a very keen mind for the future. And I focus on 3 players, which makes me think the Bills' first round pick probably should be 1 of 3 positions because of 3 players. I'm talking edge, talking receiver, talking defensive tackle. Von Miller, 35 years old, probably his last year, more than probably his last year in Buffalo. Not really a lot in terms of established edge rushers in the Bills' pipeline right now. So I'm paying really close attention to see if I could get a guy who could maybe learn from Von Miller for the first year and then really, hopefully emerge and blossom going forward. Stephon Diggs. I'm not ready to say this is his last year in Buffalo. I know there's a lot of people who are. I'm not one of them, but it's certainly possible that this is his last year in Buffalo. So I'm all about getting a wide receiver to potentially be that guy, be that number 1 guy. If there really is a true number 1 guy anymore with the Buffalo Bills. But with Diggs gone, I'm looking at a guy who may have that wide receiver 1 potential. Maybe not in year 1, but down the road. And then I'm also looking at defensive interior because DaQuan Jones just resigned a 2-year deal. He's 32 years old. Who knows how his health is going to play out this year? And I want a succession plan in place there as well. So if the right guy falls there, those are the 3 positions I feel like anyway that you can easily go with a first round pick, with it being not even so much only about 2024, but also the future in mind as well. There's a couple guys that if they're available at 28, like if they slip a little bit in this draft, that they're possibly worth a trade up for. And by trade up, I want to keep it realistic. I'm talking 2 to 3 spots, maybe 5 to 6, 7 at the absolute most maximum, where it's not costing you an arm and a leg to move up. Those 3 dudes, as of things stand right now, funny, I just said these 3 positions, but Johnny Newton, a defensive tackle, I'd be interested in that. Wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr., I might be interested in that. And Latu, Because I'm going to tell you what, if this guy had no medicals, no concern whatsoever, because he was medically retired at one time, this guy would be a lock to be a top 10 pick. But if these scares some teams off, and Buffalo ain't one of them, and this dude's around 21, 22, I'm certainly at least strongly considering moving up for him. If I keep the pick at 28, there's two non-wide receivers that I would strongly consider if staying at that 28th pick. One of them is the guy that Bruce Nolan picked last week, Jackson Powers-Johnson. Even if he's not playing center early on, like if the plan's truly to commit for now to Connor McGovern playing center, and that means Jackson Powers-Johnson starts his NFL career at guard, kind of like Eric Wood did, a former first-round pick, perfectly fine with that. And I look at it this way. Again, I don't want to get into the woods too much with an interior offensive lineman in the first round, but I'll say you got Torrance, you got Dawkins. I think Spencer Brown will be a priority extension, a guy they want to keep around for 3, 4, 5 more years. You go draft a guy like this in the first round, and bam, you got probably 80% of your offensive line intact for Josh Allen during his prime for another 3 to 5 years. So I think that's important. Then the other guy who we'll talk about when we get this mock going, I'm really, really high on, and that is Chop Robinson, the edge from Penn State. I'd almost be willing to put him in the category before where I would even consider maybe trading up for him a little bit. Just a freakish elite athlete from Penn State. And I know there's some people out there who are comparing him to Aaron Maben because he played at Penn State like 15 years ago or so. That is just idiocy, ignorance, and stupidity. Just going to put that right there. So anyway, those are two guys, non-receivers at 28. I'd be all about taking for the Buffalo Bills. Wide receivers to strongly consider. If you stay at pick 28 and you're going receiver that I think are realistically going to be potentially available, Adonai Mitchell, a guy who we know a lot about, and Xavier Leggett. Well, I'm telling you right now, there's football people out there that I watch and listen to that I put great value in who have this dude as high, or maybe even some cases higher than Brian Thomas Jr. I know, like on the PFF board, which we're going to get into here in just a minute, he's like maybe in the high 30s. He might even be ranked lower than that. But I'm telling you right now, don't be surprised if this guy's a first round pick. Like if you're only going by internet draft boards right now, you'd be like, what? You're going to get this guy in the first round and get him in the second round. You're not getting him in the second round. He ain't going to be on the board at 60. I could tell you that with supreme confidence. I could tell you he's probably not going to be on the board if you try to get up into the mid part of round 2. This guy is a ceiling somewhere in the 20s, floor, maybe mid 30s pick. I'm telling you right now. So he's going to go there. Either of those guys, even though I have some questions about Mitchell, I'd be perfectly fine with if the Bills decided to take receiver in the first round. There's 5 guys that if the Bills, I don't love these picks at 28, but if they're to trade back, maybe, as high as only 2, 3 spots, but maybe even getting down like to the mid 30s, especially defensive tackle Braden Fisk, defensive lineman Darius Robinson, wide receiver Lam McConkey, wide receiver Troy Franklin, and edge rusher Chris Braswell. If those guys, the Bills like them, but they don't love them at 28 and they get an opportunity to move down, maybe best case scenario, recouping that third pick that they lost, that would be perfect for the Buffalo Bills. I mentioned earlier the Ringer had some player comps. Let's run through some of these because, again, if you don't want to learn too much about the player, you just want to know what NFL guy that this reminds people of, we'll go wide receivers because I got a lot of them here. Brian Thomas Jr., the comp is Christian Watson. Troy Franklin is Jamison Williams. That intrigues me, by the way. Adonai Mitchell, George Pickens. Don't know how I feel about that. Keon Coleman, Allen Robinson Jr. Xavier Worthy was Zay Flowers. Look, Zay Flowers is a great player. Xavier Worthy might be a great player. I just don't think he's a fit for the Bills. And I know a lot of people would disagree with me. In fact, As I say that is rolling out of my mouth, I might disagree with myself. Anyway, moving on. Roman Wilson is Curtis Samuel. I mean, you already got Curtis Samuel, so don't know why they would be interested in that. Jalen Polk, Jacoby Myers. That's interesting. Ricky Pearsall, Nate Burleson, Javon Baker, Romeo Dobbs. So those are your receivers, and those are interesting to me. Couple edge guys. Chop Robinson is Brian Burns. That was the NFL comp from the Ringer. That's remotely true. Like I said, I already had him as a guy I'd be interested in. Now I'm even more interested in a potential trade up to make sure you get him. And then Darius Robinson, Keon White. Defensive tackle Johnny Newton is Geno Atkins. Braden Fisk is Brian Breesy. Michael Hall Jr., Kobe Turner, and Chris Jenkins. His NFL comp is Sheldon Richardson. All right, real quick here. Then we're going to get going with this mock. First round trips. And like I said, folks, my goal today is not just to have just a mock draft. I mean, if that's the case, you could just fast forward to the last 3 minutes of the video or the audio episode and get the recap of the picks. Kind of explaining and outlining things that are of interest and how things might play out. First round trade ups. Everybody wants to trade up, but not everybody has an idea of what it might realistically cost to be able to do so. If the Bills were to give up their first pick 28, their first fourth, which is 44, and pick 200 in the 7th round, add up those value points, that probably gets you to pick 25. So if you're going to give up a fourth and either a 6 or maybe a high 7th or a low 6, that might get you up 3 spots. To me, and knowing the way Brandon Beane trades up, I could certainly see that. Not a big trade up, but a small one. Tell me you can't see that, folks. For a fourth and maybe say a 6th to go from 28 to 25, if Xavier Leggett's your guy or Donnie Mitchell's your guy or Chop Robinson's your guy, and you don't see Brandon Beane doing what he usually does and moving up a couple spots to go get him. Got 11 picks. Totally could see that. If you're looking to get maybe a little bit higher, you could give up your first and next year's third because you don't have one. If you do that, if you give up 28 now and your third next year, realistically, you might get up to around 21, 22 maybe, but 21, 22, somewhere in that range. Which again, if you really like a guy, maybe a guy is, you had him in top 15 on your board, and now it's pick 21, 22, and he's still there. You're going to give up your first, probably your third next year to go get him, which at that time, of course, will lead the Bills 2 straight years without a third round pick. That said, if you got a guy in the top half of your first round board and he's there and you want to go get him, makes a lot of sense. Conversely, first round trade backs. If you drop from 28, but you only go down 2 spots, you're only picking up like 40 value points, which is the equivalent of like a late 4th rounder. Bills already got a pair of 4th rounders. So I don't see them moving back from 28 to like, say, 30 and picking up even an extra pick. Doesn't make much sense, although, of course, the way Brandon Beane is, that could be ammunition to use for trade ups and other spots. So never say never. Going from like 28 to 32, which would be the last pick of the first round, that can get you an early 4th rounder. So if there's a team that stinks that's got a high pick in the 4th round and they want to get up from 28 or from 32 to 28, then that's possible. I mean, currently this is the Chiefs, so you'd have to jump maybe a pick or 2 higher than that. Now, if you wanted to pick up a 3rd rounder, which I talked about, the Bills don't currently have one, and you want to trade down to do it, realistically, you likely are going to have to go down to about pick 37 or 38. So you got the 28th pick. You're probably going to have to drop 9 to 10 spots if you're looking at the draft value chart and where it would equate to being able to pick up a 3rd. So you would entirely fall out of the first round in the first, say, 6 picks of round 2, but then you would have 2 second rounders and you would have a 3rd rounder. If you're just looking for minor stuff, trading up both 4th rounders, which is 128 and 133, that would get you up to around pick 105 in in round 4. All right, got all that? I'm sure you do. Let's roll the mock. Let's get that going now. And we'll get to the Bills pick and then we'll take a break. And again, this is the PFF simulator, same one I've used last week and we'll probably use for all these. Kind of got the settings in the middle here. And so it's not like too pro PFF, not too pro public, not too random, draft for needs, kind of in the middle as well. I'll pause it maybe a couple more times in the first and part of the second round, and then we'll fly through. And I want to preface one last thing before we get going here too. Letting you know this right now. I am not a guy who's got 6 or 7, maybe even 5 solid rounds of knowledge on prospects. I think I'm a good, maybe an early day 3 guy where I can know a lot of guys pretty well. But admittedly, at some point, I'm just going to be throwing some darts off the wall. I'm going to be drawing off people like Bruce and Joe Marino and some other people out there, like PFF guys that I know of, who they think are good fits for the Bills and stuff like that, and tend to agree with them. So you're not going to get a lot of, dead-on analysis from me when it comes to a lot of these picks. That said, all right, so we entered the draft here. About to go. It's loading up, and we're off. I'm not even going to bother, so I'll stop it when it gets to about, say, pick 16 or 17, just to see where we're at in the halfway point of the first round. But this, like I said in the notes, is not worth the consideration of moving up for, because if you do that, you're talking giving up probably a first rounder next year, and maybe even more than that besides just 28. So I'm not even thinking that before 21, 22. Rome Donesy went 5th. That was a little bit surprising there to the Chargers. Again, no picks, and I'm kind of keeping a focus on guys that might be potential Bills picks. Denver Broncos, this is a surprise pick here. Defensive back Cooper DeJean goes 12th overall to Denver. Johnny Newton, we talked about him. He went 14th to the Saints. Alatule Latu, love that dude. He's gone at 15 to the Colts. That makes a lot of sense. We'll go a handful more picks here. All right, this is where, like I said, this is where the Bills could trade. Philadelphia would be on the clock at 22. This is where if the Bills were to trade, you're talking about giving up a 3rd rounder next year and maybe even a little bit more than that. So you're getting into a premium pick, or a prime pick, I should say, next year. By the way, in this mock, and you know how mocks go, J.J. McCarthy didn't go off the board until pick 20. To me, it's a little bit borderline ridiculous. But anyway, the guys I like in the first round, with what we see where I still at pick 22, so there's still a ways to go. Chop Robinson, still on the board. Who else do we got out that I was talking about? Jackson Powers Johnson, still on the board. The receivers, Leggett, Adonai Mitchell, still on the board. And here's the thing, folks. Brian Thomas Jr., still on the board. Still on the board at 22, which, by the way, I'm going to note this. I've heard on a PFF podcast and a couple other guys that I've heard talking, they're not that high on Brian Thomas Jr. They're just not. So, at pick 2020 or pick 22, do you want to give up a 1st and a 3rd to move up for Brian Thomas Jr.? I'm not ready to do that. So I'm going to go a couple more picks here. And now Green Bay's on the clock at 25. This is where you would potentially be able to move up for a 4th round guy. Okay. JC Latham goes 21. All right. So Brian Thomas Jr. went 1 pick before Green Bay's on the clock at 25. Brian Thomas Jr. is off the board at 24 to the Dallas Cowboys. The Green Bay Packers, folks, are on the clock. And now I got a decision to make. Me personally, and we still got 3 picks before the Bills are on the clock. Chop Robinson's there. Mitchell's there. Leggett's there. Jackson Powers is there. A couple other receivers are there. But I'm telling you this. I love the ceiling, the potential of Chop Robinson. Chris Trapasso on my show live last week from Imperial Pizza sold me even more on Chop Robinson. I love the fact, and we talked about this a little bit on the show too. I really love the fact that Von Miller would be here this year because Von Miller has an excellent reputation for molding young guys on the football field. And he's a Von Miller type. We saw the Brian Burns NFL ringer, or the ringer, I should say, NFL comp. I'm really tempted right now to try to get Chop Robinson because if I don't, I fear that he's going to be gone sometime in these next 3 picks. Between Green Bay, between Tampa, which needs is listed as edge, and then the Arizona Cardinals, who quite frankly, they could use just about everything. I'm nervous that if I really want Chop Robinson, now is the time to get him. And going by the draft value, I'd have to give up 28. To get 25, I'd have to give up 28. I would have to give up, let's say 133, which is their 4th. So I would be giving up my first round pick and my second of 2 fourths, 133 overall to get Chop Robinson. Am I going to do it? You know what, folks? I'm doing it. The Buffalo Bills are on the clock now. And just for a quick glance at the board, again, best available, Jackson Powers Jr. is there. But for the reasons, and I don't want to be here for, an eternity, I said I love Chop Robinson. By the way, ranked 43rd overall on PFF and average draft position 34.4. You look at his stats, or his first look, he's 6'3", 250. He's 21 years old. Only had 3 sacks last year. Like I said, great grades, though. You can look at the pros. I'll read actually the paragraph because we're going to take this guy. Their review per PFF. Regardless of his lack of polish, Robinson is a gifted player athletically, likely on a level in top of his class. A lot of what leaves you wanting more from Robinson is coachable. Unlocking that is the key for him to get a boomer bust athlete to a dominant edge defender. All right, folks, the Buffalo Bills, after trading up, giving up a 4th rounder, we're taking Chop Robinson. That's just the way it's going to be. Now we're going to keep our eyes on wide receiver here going into round 2, which, by the way, I stopped it because you damn well sure knew this was going to happen. With the 32nd pick, the Kansas City Chiefs took Adonai Mitchell. I would love if you're watching this or listening to this, leave a comment or tweet. I'd love to know what you think if the Bills were to draft Chop Robinson and then the Chiefs come back and they get Mitchell. By the way, Jackson Powers Johnson went to Baltimore, which means he's absolutely going to become a Pro Bowl offensive lineman for Baltimore for years to come. Bo Nix goes to the New England Patriots with pick 34. Going to resume the draft. Again, if we're going to move up from pick 60, it's really, you're going to have to be giving up a 3rd next year. Let's take a look, though. So we're at pick 52 here. Now you're not necessarily talking giving up a 3rd rounder next year because you're only going to be moving up about 8 spots. Troy Franklin, we're looking at receivers here. He goes off the board, pick 37 to the Chargers. Man, it seems like a good fit. Chris Braswell, the edge, he went to Washington. We talked about him. Other receivers here. Roman Wilson goes to the Raiders at 44. Brandon Fisk, interior guy, goes 45 to the Saints. Another receiver off the board. Keon Coleman goes to the Colts at 46. Darius Robinson, next pick to the Giants at 47. Ricky Pearsall, 49 to the Bengals. Another good fit there. There's your Tyler Boyd replacement. I want to double check this because on PFF, I can't actually go and look at players that are still available. But if I'm looking at this correctly, Xavier Legette is still on the board, folks. Xavier Legette's still on the board. And the Bills are, let's see here, like 1, 2, 3, 7 more picks before they're on the clock. What is going to be the cost of trading for this pick? So if we were to get 53, we're going to give up 60. Let's see here, 128 to give up your 4th. I got to consider this, man. Let's see if you give up your 4th. This is tough here. I'm talking on the fly. If you give up your 4th, it's saying 68% chance of being accepted. So if you give up your 4th and maybe your let's say a seventh, says 85% chance. So the Bills give up 144 and 200 to move up from 60 to 53. You know what? I'm offering a trade, and it's been accepted. So the Buffalo Bills are on the clock again. I got to tell you, folks, I did not come into this draft 100% expecting to trade up not once, but twice with the Bills' first two picks. But both times, guys were within that reasonable trade up distance. And that's the way it's worked out this time as well. So, again, without hesitation, I'm going to take Xavier Legette. I got to take Xavier Legette. Have to do it. Jalen Polk is on the board, and I do like him. Xavier Worthy, surprisingly, still on the board. Javon Baker still on the board. I just look at Legette, and I'm like, this dude has that potential, that big body. He can do so much. He has that potential to be that alpha, that number one future wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills, if that even really matters that much. So anyway, I'm going to draft him right now. We're going to get ready to take a break here. So with the first two picks with the Buffalo Bills, I'm in heaven right now. I got two guys that I would have taken at 28. I got Chop Robinson. I traded up 3 spots for him. And then I moved up and I got my receiver. I got Xavier Legette in the second round. I moved up to pick 53. Thank you very much, Philadelphia Eagles. Now I've lost some picks, but frankly, I don't really care because I got two guys who I think can be studs. We're going to take a quick break, come back, leave this rolling, and the Buffalo Bills still got another 6 picks left. Let's see what happens. All right, I am back here. Had a little bit of technical difficulties going into that break. But anyway, so the Buffalo Bills now have had 2 picks, and we've went edge, we've went receiver. We're going to come up on the board here, and the Buffalo Bills are on the clock here. Pick 128 of round 4. All right, I said before the draft I wanted to look at safeties. So let's take a look at safeties. I think this is a great time to get one. Cole Bishop from Utah is on the board. And I got to tell you, I didn't expect that here. There's 4 safeties that I anticipated being on the board for the Bills. Maybe 1 to 2 of them would have been available. Bo Braid, Malik Mustafa, James Williams from Miami, Jalen Simpson from Auburn. Didn't really expect them to be on the board. But Cole Bishop is a good safety, man. This guy is out of Utah. I've heard a lot of good things about it. I know Chris Trapasso has talked high of him. I've heard PFF say a lot of good things on their podcast that I watch pretty much, by the way, almost every day. This is tough. I got to tell you, I didn't expect this. Man, sometimes, by the way, we got a couple trade offers as well, too. Arizona, I'm not really interested in that. You know what? We're not moving down. So we're going to draft a player. So now we got 128. Now, before the trades, we also would have had pick 133 if I'm the Buffalo Bills. Might have wanted with these safeties on the board, I might have been tempted to look elsewhere and maybe come back to one of them because Braylon Allen is a running back that I kind of like. He's a big dude, 6'2", 245 pounds. PFF's, their description is supersized running back prospect, likely a mid-round pick due to that and his age alone. By the way, he's 20 years old. What the hell are they talking about? However, his decision-making and feel for space leave much to be desired when separating his success from his offensive line. I feel like if I don't take the running back now or the safety, I might not get one of the guys I like. Braylon Allen is a guy, though, that I've heard a lot of things about, man. I'm tempted. I'm really tempted. You know what? I'm going to pull the trigger here. Braylon Allen is the pick. Running back Braylon Allen is the Bills' 3rd pick, who we got in the 4th round. Our next pick is going to be on the clock here. Pick 160 in the 5th round. I can tell you right now, I'm going right to safeties and seeing who's there. Actually, hopefully I didn't screw up too much here because, well, I didn't. Because the guy I would have taken if I didn't take a running back the pick before is Bo Braid, the safety. Bruce took him in our mock. last week. A really good in the box safety that he likes the potential for an awful lot. So I'm going to pull the trigger there. Coming right back, pick 163. I was looking at this guy before the draft too. Let's go to the interior of the offensive line. Zach Zinter out of Michigan. He is the 160th ranked player on the PFF board. Their analysis says Zintner's movement limitations will likely limit him to man gap schemes, but he does have sufficient power to get a shot at a starting role at some point in such systems. So, Zach Zinter, a guard, is definitely a possibility. If you want to look at corners, let's see here. Make sure I hit the right button. I'm going to go to corners. I'm looking, and there's not anyone that I really recognize here personally, so I don't want to I don't want to get too much into Drain. Is Chris Abrams Drain on the board? I think he was pick 114. I know that was a guy that Chris Trapasso talked up an awful lot, but he's not there. What about Dwight McGarthan, too? That's another one that I've heard a lot of good things about. Don't see him, so I don't think he's on the board as well either. So, nope, we lost out on corner. So, I don't think we're going to do much with corner for this draft. Going to go back to the guard. I'm going to take the interior offensive lineman, who's the highest ranked on the PFF board as well, Zach Zinter from Michigan. All right, we got 3 picks left here. And the next one is at 189. I'm ecstatic about this draft because I got 2 guys that I really loved. 2 guys who I think are first round guys for sure. And I got a day 3 early safety, which is something that I wanted. What I didn't get, and we'll talk about this after the draft, is I have not been able to get a defensive interior lineman. There wasn't really any that I liked on the board that kind of matched with the value, what I thought anyway. And again, the pickings are very low. So we're likely going to go here. Let's go linebacker. Let's see if the linebacker from Ohio State's on the board. Bruce took him and he is there. Steel Chambers, a linebacker from Ohio State. Bruce said he could see him being potentially like the Tyler Matekovich of this football team. We got 2 picks left, 204, 248. I would even be looking to trade out of one of these, to be honest with you. Maybe get a 6th if you can get something next year. Any quarterbacks of interest? Do we take Tua's brother to troll again? This would come, and again, I said this before the draft, folks, to be completely honest with you. This is me at this point just throwing some darts and seeing what happens, trying to see if there's any corners. I'm always down to take Michigan people. I'll tell you that. Actually, DeQuan Hardy from Penn State is a guy that I've heard a lot about. Not a great grade, but he's a smaller slot corner, as PFF says. Maybe he could eventually become a backup to Teron Johnson, could play some special teams. So, what the hell? Why not? DeQuan Hardy, a corner from Penn State. And now we got a way to go with our last pick. The only thing I feel like I really was looking to get, and I said pre-draft, was a defensive interior lineman. And if I made a mistake in this mock, which again, this is a thought exercise at the end of the day, I feel like if I could go back and redo one thing when it was the 4th round and I had the running back, I took Braylon Allen, I should have taken a closer look at defensive interior tackle. You probably could have got a guy who's at least good enough to be a rotational piece in that. But instead, I went running back. All right, so last pick here, best overall on the board. Try to see if any of these guys stand out to me, any players that I know. Quite honestly, that answer is no. Nope. All right, so we're just gonna go. Like I said, give me a developmental guy. Who's the quarterback on the board? I'm gonna take Sam Hartman just because I heard of him. I'm a Notre Dame guy, so I'm playing homage right now to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. I'm taking their quarterback from last year, Sam Hartman. All right, folks. So that is my mock draft here. To recap it, we'll go through it. We traded up in round 1. We gave up the 28th pick, and we gave up our 4th rounder, pick 133. We went from 28 to 25, and I took edge rusher Chop Robinson from Penn State. PFF says C minus, piss off PFF. Second round, we traded up a second time. We gave up pick 60, 144, 200. We moved up to 53, took Xavier Leggett. I'm going to be honest with you. I love this. PFF grades that a B plus, but I'm going to be honest with you. Almost feels like fantasy land to me because I don't think he would be there at 53 to be able to move up 4. So, but he was today, and we took him. Fourth round, Braylon Allen, the big running back from Wisconsin. I got a C plus grade for that from PFF. Rounds 5, 2 picks. Safety Bo Braid. Second straight week of taking him in this mock from Maryland. And then I took the highest rated guard, Zach Zinter from Michigan. 6th round, Steel Chambers, linebacker from Ohio State. And also DeQuan Hardy, a corner / slot corner from Penn State. And then with the last pick, kind of a throwaway pick to be completely honest with you, because I don't see NFL potential in him, but I guess you never know. Sam Hartman, the quarterback from Notre Dame. So, ended up making 8 picks. The Bills went into the draft with 11 picks. To put a real quick bow on this draft right now, I'm very happy because, again, I don't expect it to play out this way. To be able to get Chop Robinson and Xavier Leggett, guys who I would have ran to the podium for either of them at pick 28, to get one at 25, which I did move up for. That's realistic. Getting Chop Robinson to me at 25, that feels realistic. Xavier Leggett, that might be pushing the realism button just a little bit, being able to get him. So that part of my draft, I love. I love getting Bo Braid still in the 5th round because I thought I was going to be taking him in the 4th, and he was still available. Where I feel I missed the boat, 2 things. Defensive tackle, I didn't address this at all. I did not help this football team by not addressing it. That said, you can't get everything in one draft. And the Bills, their first 4 with defensive tackle kind of feel pretty set this year. I mean, you got Ed, you got DeQuan Jones, you got Austin Johnson, who they signed, and you got Dwayne Williams, who they signed as free agents. So, I mean, they got 4. We'll see. But I kind of feel like I dropped the ball a little bit. I would have liked to add some young talent to that position, and I didn't do that. And then the other thing is corner. I would have liked to have gotten a corner a little bit earlier than I did. Dwight McGlothern is a guy that I would have liked to have had, and I kind of missed the boat on him, and I'm not too pleased about that. But again, you can't get everything that you want. I get that. Chris Abrams drained. That's another corner that Chris Trapasso's talked up that I like a lot. Now, I will say, if this played out differently, and let's say Philly wasn't interested in trading up, or let's say Xavier Leggett was gone and, trading up wasn't really an option to go get a receiver at 53 instead of staying at 60, would have been left with an interesting decision. And this is something I will spend time thinking about. The way the mock draft played out, it would have came down to, because I said, if you want to get a receiver in the first 2 rounds and you take Chop Robinson in the first, the way it played out without Xavier Leggett, let's just say he was gone, like it's gone, it would have been Jalen Polk or Javon Baker. Those would have been the Bills' best 2 choices with that second round pick. Were Xavier Leggett not there and we didn't make a move for him? Like, we would have stood at 60 and Xavier goes. That's what it would be. And that's what I was talking about when it comes to these mock drafts. Don't just look at who I took and say, oh, this draft's great or this draft sucks. Spend some time whether you're doing your own mock, whether you're evaluating others, especially if you're like either reading an article that comes with it or you're listening to a show like this. Spend some time thinking about the scenarios and how things play out and the decisions that you would have had to make. Because, again, I think it would have been If you're going to get a receiver in round 2, it would have been Jalen Polk or Javon Baker. And I think that would have been, without question, a fascinating conversation. But anyway, that is going to do it for this episode. This was fun. Kind of losing my voice like usual here when I do these solo shows at the end. But this was a really fun exercise. I kind of, when you do a mock, you almost get in that, you get into that, what's the word I'm looking for here? You're instantly looking to go back and do it over again. Like there's some things I'd love to have a redo. And that's the crazy thing about an NFL, like the real NFL. Brandon Beane and his staff, they don't get a redo. They got to do it right. They got to do it right the first time. I could do another mock in 20 minutes and correct some of the mistakes I made. That's the shit to me that makes this the most fun. But anyway, thank you very much, as always, for watching, for listening. If you have not subscribed, please, please, please go ahead and do so. It helps us continue to grow the show. I think I got Tone Puck scheduled for tomorrow's show. And then, like I said, live late Thursday night, Imperial Pizza, former Buffalo Bills corner Marlon Curter will be with me. That show we're doing at 8 o'clock. So if you happen to be in South Buffalo, you want to come up, want to hang out, want to meet Marlon Curter, be sure to do that. Podcast version of that will be out Friday morning. Talk to you guys tomorrow.